an economic paradigm that prioritizes profit and expansions over the well-being of human beings, people, and the planet. And for us, this is directly linked with the theme of overconsumption, because it's noteworthy that the less affluent countries in the global south contribute only 1% to the world's total consumption. In contrast, the wealthiest billion individuals, primarily residing in the West and also in the European Union, account for a staggering 72%. The consumption rate in Europe, exceeding twice the sustainable limit, poses a significant challenge for our future decisions. How we can balance this effort to contrast climate crisis and continue this consumption level? We think that is not possible, that we have to change paradigm to address ecological challenges. While commendable, of course, initiatives like the European Union Climate Law and the European Green Deal exist, and is something positive. It's imperative to transcend the only decarbonization objectives. It's not enough talking only about carbon emission and talking about circular economy if we only not decide how to invest better at all levels to address climate challenges. So we advocated for a comprehensive approach, calling for a European Union framework on sustainable resource justice management. Such a framework will guide the European Union towards achieving a sustainable level of resource consumption, and we hope also with a binding material footprint. Today, our objective, our aim with this discussion, is to engage different stakeholders in a dialogue with our distinguished panel of policymakers. Together, let's explore collaborative avenues to pave the way for a better, more sustainable and peaceful future that benefits everyone. Let's initiate this discussion and discover actionable solutions for positive change. This is the time to create a common narrative, common to the North and the South, and I'm really glad to the possibility to leave the floor for introductory remarks to Oliver Röpke, the President of the European Economic and Social Committee, that helped us to introduce this theme. Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, Daniele, for the introduction to this debate and to this highly important topic for our committee. I'm really glad to see so many of you here with a slight overweight on the left wing, but I think everybody should be interested in this important topic. I have to say, we from the European Economic and Social Committee, we are here with a I would say quite strong delegation. We are even rotating among members to be always present during the whole conference. I just arrived yesterday morning, so it's my second day, but I can tell you I'm already amazed by also by the coordination of the different stakeholder groups. Some of you I met already today with the youth organizations, for example, but also with policymakers, and I think this interaction makes it so important to be here on the ground and to make our points. I would like to express especially my gratitude to the European Youth Forum and to Generation Climate Europe for co-organizing this event. I think it's quite logical. We have already a very close cooperation also within the committee. For those of you who are not so familiar with the EU structures, the EESC, the European Economic and Social Committee, is an EU institution, an advisory body composed of three groups: employers, trade unions, and civil society organizations. We have mainly an advisory function for the European institutions, but it doesn't mean that we raise only our voice if we are asked. We do it also proactively. So for many years, I can assure you that we are promoters and supporters of a sustainable economic model, and also very much engaged in the question of beyond growth, debate about degrowth, all those questions. And I think we were even, when it came to the Green Deal that you mentioned, that we have supported from the very beginning, I think we were also the first institution who said this can be only a success if a Green Deal is also a social deal, and if it's really accepted by all stakeholders. So I said over the last years, the EESC has been working on how to enhance also the inclusion of young Europeans in its work and in the EU decision-making process, especially striving for a structured and meaningful integration. And since we have the two co-organizers here, I would like to say that we launched some years ago our program for youth delegate. I'm happy that Diandra is here, our EESC youth delegate, and I'm also happy that one of our former youth delegates, Sophia, is here and will close this session. This shows that as EESC we opened our doors already before, and now we do it in an even more structured manner to listen, not only to listen, it's not the right word, no, to involve really civil society and especially young civil society from outside the committee in our work. We have heard today's conference, today's event will delve into the beyond growth concept and the principles of sufficiency, offering a fresh perspective on progress for sustainable and equitable future. It is clear from our perspective that our current production and consumption models are not sustainable. Our current economic model disregards planetary boundaries, with 6 of 9 boundaries already exceeded. And the climate action and target architecture developed over the past decades primarily focuses on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. From our perspective, from our point of view, this alone will not solve the environmental nor the societal crisis. To solve these problems, we need to move from resource extraction and infinite growth to a world where prosperity, well-being and social progress are combined. And this requires, from our point of view, a systemic change. So already in 2020, I said we were one of the front runners of this sustainable economic model. In 2020, we adopted an opinion during the Finnish EU presidency under the title "The Sustainable Economy We Need," and we emerged as an institutional pioneer of the well-being economy narrative at the EU level. And this opinion urged the EU to propose a new vision of prosperity grounded in environmental sustainability, the right to a decent life, and the protection of social values. So I can assure you we will continue to champion this paradigm shift, therefore the debate today. And I can just assure you that in our bilateral context that we have, I just met before the German State Minister, Anna Lührmann, I made especially these points. Without big surprise, she shared it, but I think it's important to show that we are many and not only a few, and we will continue to promote this model. In this respect, once again, thank you very much for coming. I look forward to this debate and hope that the whole conference will be a success, and I can assure you again that our committee will really strive to be the convening space for civil society when it comes to the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver. I think we could agree that one of the strengths of the committee on these issues is the openness to the civil society and especially the youth organization. And this, I think this today panel show us really well. Stay with us. Welcoming our first 2 keynote speakers. I have the pleasure to call on stage Sandrine Dixson-Declève and Heitor Dellasta. They will help us to explore what it means to both conceptual and practical size, what it means this new vision of prosperity, combining all the aspects, economical, social, environmental. We will start with Sandrine Dixson-Declève, that is amongst an international and European climate, energy, sustainable development, sustainable finance expert. She is currently the co-president of the Club of Rome and divides her time between lecturing, facilitating, difficult conversation and negotiations, and also involved in a lot of advisory board. And also she currently chairs the European Commission Expert Group on Economic and Societal Impact and Research Innovation, and sits on other several boards. In addition, she is an ambassador of the Energy Transition Commission and the Wellbeing Alliance, and fellow of the World Academy of Science. So a lot of things that will help us to explore what sufficiency means for you and for European Union, and how we tackle the root of causes of the planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, and so on. And also, if you can, how much this topic of overconsumption sufficiency is into negotiations or not here at the COP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 7 minutes. Okay, all that in 7 minutes. So this is going to be a whirlwind tour. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the co-president of the Club of Rome. Some of you may or may not know, we were the first organization to talk about the limits to growth in 1972. Lo and behold, here we are in the middle of the social and environmental tipping points that were already predicted then. First message, we don't have another 50 years to waste. We have wasted 50 years. Are we talking about consumption at this COP? Absolutely not. In fact, the biggest message from the limits to growth, and the one that we continue to talk about at the Club of Rome, is that we absolutely need to shift from an extractive economy that is fully dependent on materials and also fossil energy into an economy that is promoting people, planet, and prosperity. In that respect, I would like to warmly thank, and truly, your leadership and the leadership of the European Economic and Social Committee, because it is a committee that has continued to say that we need to address beyond growth in the same way that the European Parliament has, in terms of the way in which it's brought together a multi-party group of parliamentarians who have said enough is enough. Now, does that mean that we're talking about sufficiency? No, we're not talking about sufficiency. For the moment, what we're talking about is holding on to the system that we already have. That is an over-financialized economic system that is predominantly based on shareholder value, that looks at profit and power and short-term cycles, in particular political cycles and also shareholder cycles, rather than long-term well-being of people and planet. Now, how do we then restructure that thinking? And I would say that part of the new work that we've done, either through Earth for All, a Survival Guide for Humanity, which actually looks at 5 key turnarounds, which give us the solutions to get out of the mess that we're in. Number 1, ensure that we address poverty and inequality. Why? Because we have seen that the scale and speed of getting back into a safe operating zone, so not going beyond any more planetary boundaries, we've already gone out of 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries, is directly linked to the speed and scale of eradicating poverty and inequality. Those are our first 2 turnarounds. But the third turnaround is inextricably linked, which is the empowerment of women. Because we know fundamentally well that we need more diversity in decision-making, not because this is about quotas, but because this is about complexity. And when we say diversity and empowerment, we are talking about ensuring that in all of our decision-making, in terms of the access to education, that we have more people that are able to unpack complex problems with new types of solutions. Because, ladies and gentlemen, as much as I very much appreciate the men that are in this room, we're talking about shifting from a patriarchal system that is purely based on a neoliberal extractive system into a system that brings back values, the value of natural capital, the value of human capital. So that means shifting towards a well-being economy. And our giant leap scenario brings in then those first 3 turnarounds, right, around empowerment, poverty, and inequality, with the energy transition and the food transition. Now, what does that look like? Well, the fact of the matter is, if we continue to enable energy poverty across the globe, on the back of windfall profits that are being made by the wealthiest multinationals, oil and gas, who actually make on a daily level 2.8 billion profits on a daily level. Let's just put that into some kind of understanding that the loss and damage fund was 500,000 when it was launched, actually, a drop in the bucket when you think that that's supposed to sustain countries and build the resilience that they need. And yet at the same time, we're seeing oil and gas tycoons that are making so much in terms of profit. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like wealth distribution. No, this is not a communistic model. This is a model that goes back to, once again, understanding, and that's why this committee is so important, the social and economic impacts of our economic model. It goes away from shareholder value. It goes away from profiting only the few, whether it be the difference between the North and the South, or whether it be inequality that is actually growing within our own countries in the North. Because we can see, whether it be in the United States, in most of our urban cities, that actually social tension is increasing because inequality is increasing, that we have the highest homelessness issues that we've ever seen. So, coming back to this COP, the #1 decision that is going to make this COP a success is to prove that we can shift from an extractive model. And the #1 extractive industry that is here trying to prevent that to happen is the oil and gas sector. Everything hinges on whether we will get a deal on fossil fuel phase-out. Mark my words, if this is not a COP that brings us a deal on fossil fuel phase-out, it will not be a success. That is clear. And this is not because we want to penalize the oil and gas sector. This is, again, because social tension, social well-being hinges on the shift from an extractive economy, as well as meeting our climate objectives. An instability, insecure world is also bad for business. It is bad for jobs because, as Sharon Burrow, the former head of the International Trade Union Confederation, said, there are no jobs on a dead planet. There is no Wall Street on a dead planet. So a little bit of fair distribution goes a long way. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sandrine. Perfectly in time and perfectly into the topic. Thank you for a lot of inspiring words and also insights that we can elaborate further. Before to give the floor to the next speaker, I would say to the online participants too that they can present us questions. There is the Slido open and the password is Sufficiency, of course. So go on with Heitor Dellasta. He is a youth specialist in the field of ecological economics and is also policy coordinator Global Youth Biodiversity Network and is also member of Yongo. For this reason, for us, it's really important your presence here. 7 minutes to tell us from the youth perspective what are the main challenges posed to tackling the root causes of the planetary boundaries with the concept and the tools of sufficiency. And if you see a meaningful involvement of youth in the negotiation settings here in the COP.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Thank you very much all for sharing your time with us here. My name is Heitor. I'm the policy co-coordinator for the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, which is the official youth constituency for the UN CBD. So thank you, Sandrine, for your words, and I will assure you that we do not combine our speeches, but we will be very aligned, and that's very good. So we are very happy to see a sufficiency discussion here, because most of times we are always talking about efficiency. We are always talking about innovative solutions and technological solutions, and most of them are only putting us around our same problems, trying to keep us in the same pathway that bring us here to the socio-ecological crisis. So we are all sitting here together because we share the same warning about climate crisis, but also about biodiversity loss. And we need to start putting all these twin crises and these multiple and diverse socio-ecological crises together. Otherwise, we are starting, or we are already losing our time. And we need to be very harmful about agendas, actions, and plans for climate that are being harmful for nature in context. So I will bring 2 principal points here. The first one is that we need to understand how sufficiency is being discussed on global South and global North. And they are different. In global North, we know that the roots of the crisis that bring us here are directly relationship with the production model that we have, our economic systems. We are talking about the great acceleration that brings us here to this socio-ecological crisis. So we are talking about urbanization, we're talking about industrialization, we are talking about consumption. And all of these is rooted in a mentality about development in a only unique perspectives that are related with economic growth and progress. And here we are. And of course that we all know a lot about this type of discussions, and that's why we are putting about post-growth, post-development discussions, to rethink the way that Global North shaped itself and the way that we need to rethink our economic system from this perspective. I think this is very well addressed. But at the same time, we need to think how Global North have also shaped the Global South. And our economies were basically related with the same interaction with Global North. The way that we are inserted in the international economy were shaped by the same devastating structure of Global North. So on our side, Global South have also the same discussion about sufficiency, but it's more related with our extractivism economies. And extractivist economies means exactly the way that we are exploitation our nature and our people. We are exploitation and overconsumption about our own territories. Of course that we are talking about here about mineral industries, but we're also talking about agribusiness industries. We are talking about large-scale forestry process. We are talking about huge-scale development projects that builds all this structure for being able to consume, to exploitate our nature, and to sell, to commercialize, and to sell it to the Global North most specifically. So in Global South discussions, the result is exactly a relationship with a lot of socio-environmental conflicts with our indigenous peoples and local communities. We are talking about sufficiency in Global South, specifically related for post-extractivism economies. So how can we build a new economy, a new sustainable economy? It's fair for people, it's regenerative for nature, and at the same time, is still economic, sustainable for our societies. So this is my main point. We need to think about sufficiency regarding our different socio-ecological realities. And the second point, it's about our values structure. So we know that now economic and monetary values are basically the only one that are in the table of discussion. So these are the values that bring us to the socio-ecological crisis. So we know that World Economic Forum recently put it climate and nature as on the top 5 of the main risks for economy and business. And we need, of course, to think that this is most of all related that the way that our economy and business create impacts on nature. But beyond this, we need to think about how our economy and our business depend on nature. So we are still talking about the same monetary values. We are talking about that monetary values for the same economy, the same business are threatened because we are living in this crisis. So we can't keep our business as usual. And finalizing, still on the point of values perspective, when we youth are put into the decision-making process, but we are always saying we are aligned with other indigenous peoples and local communities, girls and women, we are talking about different types of values perspective. We are talking about diversity of values of nature. So this type of values that goes for intrinsic values, value nation by itself, at the same time relational values that value nations, but the relationship we have with us, the relation that we have with our territories, means that they are incommensurable. They can't have the same treat as monetary values, and we can't compare these values from each other. So from youth perspective, of course, that we have our strong intergenerational value, intergenerational justice perspective, which means how can we keep our lives for the future generations if we do not have our guarantee of a health country, of a health planet. And for most of indigenous peoples and local communities discussions, we share the perspective that we are talking about most of all relational values. They are parents, they are secret places. We can't keep talking about different types of values and putting them in the same types of discussions. How can we take and start a decision-making process that these diverse values are put into consideration? So the second point, and just finalizing, is exactly that we need to also start to think about sufficiency in the perspective of diverse values of nature for different types of stakeholders. So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. You well aligned that our discussion on sufficiency is also a discussion of values, and it's something that we have to keep in mind when we design policies and laws. Thank you, big round of applause for our keynote speakers. Now we change the setting. And we start our panel discussion. I call on stage to change the seats. Jesus Maria Alcesar Sabadi, DG Environment from the European Commission. Nina Ratilainen, member of the Turku City Council, Finland, the Greens. Sanjita Ben-Ratod and their colleague Mansi, who will help translate her. And Sven Harmeling, International Climate Policy Coordinator, Can Europe. Yeah. In this panel discussion, we will discuss the impact and solution to address disproportionate consumption patterns between the North and the global South countries. We start with a very short, less than 1 minute, to explain briefly your connection with the Beyond Grow sufficiency discussion. So we start from Sven.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I mean, of course, within Can Europe, we are a network of over 200 NGOs across Europe from a diverse spectrum, but all committed to work on climate change. It's something which comes up over and over again, and we are also part at the moment of a project which basically looks into how can sufficiency-based measures, policies be promoted in NDCs and other policy tools as one important element of the wider spectrum of measures we need. And so it's definitely an important part of our work. It links to many other issues. It links to energy. It links to the way that we build communities, etc. So maybe I'll leave it with that.
Yes, go Nina.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm Nina Ratilainen from the EU Committee of the Regions. We represent over 1 million local and regional leaders throughout Europe, so a big mass of people who can make change happen. I'm also a local and regional council in the city of Turku, southwest coast of Finland, and maybe my entry point to this topic today is that we so often say that there is no life on that planet. I suppose we also can say that there is no life on dead cities. At least it's not fun and attractive to citizens. So that is something that we have to make clearer in cities in future and implement this thought also to our climate planning and strategies and really bring well-being and well-being over economic growth.
Thank you. Jesus?
Yes, thank you very much. At the Commission, we used to receive visitors, generally students, young people, and I used to be invited to present the European Green Deal. So you know the top priority of the Commission about solving our environmental crisis. And I always explain these objectives, these policies, but at a certain point I have to say, because I have to defend the policies of the Commission, that this is a green growth strategy. And then generally young people react and say, sorry, you are saying that our resources are limited and you talk about green growth. There is something that doesn't work there. And then I try, of course, I have to defend the Commission. So I try to explain, yes, but you know, we are promoting circular material use, but then I say, but only 12% of our materials are recycled. I explain, we have decoupling between GHG emissions and economic growth, but I have to say we are only counting our internal emissions. And I explain about energy efficiency, so we reduced our energy consumption by 2020. Yes, but thanks to the COVID. So I feel that I'm not very convincing defending the Commission. And one of the reasons is that the topic of beyond growth, degrowth, etc., has been historically a sort of taboo in the Commission and in the EU institutions. So really, the first time there was a big discussion on this was in the European Parliament last May or March, I don't remember. There was a big conference on this. And this is, I believe that this is really the moment where we can change this mindset and break this taboo.
Yes, Sangeeta?
નમસ્તે, મારું નામ સંગીતાબેન રાઠોડ છે અને હું સેવામાંથી છું અને હું આજે 25 લાખ બહેનો વતી હું મારો સમસ્યાનો પ્રશ્ન લઈને આવી છું અને હું ખેતી અને પશુપાલન કરું છું.
Namaste, I'm Sangeeta Ben Rathod and I am a grassroots member, a smallholder farmer, and I represent over 2.5 million poor women workers from the informal economy in India in SEWA.
આજના જમાનામાં એવું થઈ રહ્યું છે કે જમીન ટૂંકી થતી જાય છે અને લોકો વધતા જાય છે. જ્યારે જમીન તો ઓછી થાય પણ લોકો જે બહાર કામ કરવા જતા રહે છે, તો જે બહાર કામ કરવા જતા રહેશે ને એમનું અભ્યાસ પણ ઓછો હોય છે, જેનાથી જે બહાર કામ કરવા જાય એ લોકો એને જ ગરીબી પરિસ્થિતિમાં જ રહે છે અને એમનું દેવું વધતું જ જાય છે.
So I would like to share the members whom I represent are the poorest of the poor. They are the agriculture workers, grassroots workers. And if I talk about their issues and challenges, what we are seeing is in the rural areas, the land holdings are shrinking day by day and the families are increasing. And because of that, there is a lack of access to livelihood opportunities in the rural areas. And also the quality of education is not poor. So the young generation has to migrate to the urban areas in search of livelihood opportunities.
અમારી સેવામાં વધારે પડતું સંગઠન ખેડૂતોનું જ હોય છે, જેમાં અમારા ઈલાબેન એવું કહીને ગયા છે કે જે રાસાયણિક ખેતી કરતા હોય એને દંડિત કરવા જોઈએ અને જે જૈવિક ખેતી કરતા હોય એમને પ્રોત્સાહન મળવું જોઈએ. એવું પણ અર્થતંત્ર હોવું જોઈએ.
So when we while all of you are talking about urban context and materials and all, I would like to bring the focus to the rural areas and the agriculture sector. Because agriculture is shrinking, to increase the productivity, the farmers are switching to chemical fertilizers, which is also a material and unsustainable material. And therefore at SEWA, our founder Ila Ben, she always used to say that there is a need for a new economic model, an economic model that would punish the people who would use the chemicals and incentivize the smallholder farmers who would use the organic and green sustainable agriculture.
Thank you. We go explore further these issues. How it works, this panel discussion. We try to be dynamic, so we have prepared 3 guiding questions, 8-10 minutes per total discussion per question. I will present you the first question and open the floor for who of you want to start with some insight. So, first question is a conceptual one. Why is there still political inaction? Why has there been so little discussion on sufficiency and material resource use, given the fact that it is responsible for more than 50% of greenhouse gas and 19% of biodiversity loss? Who want to start on this?
Yes, I can.
You go ahead.
Yes, I can start. So as I said, at European level, so this discussion has always been a taboo. So we have to remember the logic of capitalism. So to make the luxuries of today the needs of tomorrow. So this is the logic that, in my opinion, we should change. Also politically, it's very difficult to sell concepts like degrowth. So the logic of politics in our democracies is very short-term, unfortunately. So if a politician now in the current context say, we need sufficiency, etc., he's likely to be killed in media and politically. This said, the Commission has been working since at least 2009 on Beyond Growth. There was a communication on 2009, probably nobody read it, talking about these concepts. And also in terms more statistical, so the idea is to go beyond GDP. So the GDP is a measure, and we have different indicators on resource productivity, on consumption products, on natural capital accounting, super important, I think rather neglected. But as I said, when we see the concrete results, so the circular material use rate is 12%. So we are talking a lot about circular economy, resource efficiency, but 12%. So I think there is something that we are not going enough well, in my opinion.
Yeah. Maybe less words and more results. Would you want to add something on this?
Yes, I think there was many good thoughts I can continue from. I don't think that sufficiency is a word that is quite often used in politics. I'm not sure if I've ever heard it in our city council, I have to say. I have to implement it, of course, in our next meeting. Now I will promise it. But yes, of course, this is the nature of politics hasn't been supportive for degrowth, and it just came to my mind, we have so many prizes for cities, for example, that also reward us from doing something more or growing in some aspect. Maybe someone should introduce a degrowth prize for a city that has been able to go nearer to the planetary boundaries. That would be, I'm not sure if there is one already, at least we haven't won it yet, so, but if it's not there, please establish one. I absolutely also blame GDP. We do what we measure, so we have to change what we measure to be able to change the way we do things in local politics. I absolutely think that is very necessary. And it was well said that it hasn't been regarded as a politically something that you want to strive for and something that the voters will thank you for. So I do believe strongly in people and in movements and in NGOs. So it was very inspirational for me that the European Union had the Beyond Growth conference last spring, because I absolutely think that we are able to change the system, but we need large masses of people and big willingness for that, because of course we politicians are there to change politics, but to be honest, I think that the people is the greatest power to do that and support us to do the change.
Yeah, thank you. It's really important to also address these GDP measures. I always say that always with GDP we risk to count with what doesn't matter and not count what matters for real. I don't know if there are other 2-3 minutes on this topic if needed, if you want.
Yeah, maybe briefly. I think it's of course also important that we need to reflect that even if we use the term like degrowth or beyond growth, that we need to differentiate, right? I mean, we're talking here about a collective commitment to triple renewables. This is an area which, whatever 1.5 scenario we sign up to, it's clear that renewables needs to be massively expanded in the most sustainable way, of course, and we need other areas which really need to degrow. But I think that sometimes there's a challenge with the messaging. I think that you need to get across that there are areas we need to move forward for the transition and others we need to get out of as quickly as possible. And then find the right measures towards it. So maybe just to add to this discussion at this point.
ગામડામાં જે ખેડૂતો ખેતી કરતા હોય એ બાર ગામ કમાવા માટે જતા રહે. જેના કારખાનો વધારે ઊભા થયા છે ને એટલા માટે જ ખેતી કરતા બંધ થયા છે લોકો. એના લીધે ગરીબી વધતી જાય છે. તો એના માટે અમારી સેવામાં જે સ્વચ્છ આકાશ, રૂડી અને એની તાલીમો આપવામાં આવે છે, જેનાથી જે રૂડીનું સામાન હોય, જેમ કે જે અનાજ આપણે પોતે ઉગાડતા હોય એ જ આપણે બહેનોમાં વેચાણ થાય. એના લીધે ગરીબી પણ ના આવે અને બહેનોને સારું અનાજ પણ મળી રહે.
So she would like to share that when the climate shocks are impacting the small and marginal farmers disproportionately, and it is leading to an increase in, it is making agriculture very unsustainable and unviable, and therefore either the young generation is migrating to the urban areas or they are resorting to chemical pesticides and fertilizers for agriculture, and this is leading to increase in cash crops and reduction in the food grain crops, and also loss of biodiversity. And therefore, if we are looking at how do you address this, there is a need to bring focus back on the workers and organizing workers into their own economic organizations, into their own value chains, so that the women are integrated at all stages in the food supply chain, thereby bringing in food and nutrition security.
આ તંત્ર શરૂ કરવાથી સ્ત્રીઓમાં મજબૂત તો આવે જ, પણ જે સર્ક્યુલર પાલન પોષણ અર્થતંત્ર પણ બની રહે છે.
This will also lead to developing, it will give rise to a new economic model. It's called at SEWA we call as economy of nurturance, which will strengthen the role of the women, and it will also address the areas of women's empowerment and gender inclusion.
આ તંત્રને મજબૂત બનાવવા માટે નાણાકીય અને સાથ સહકારની અને તાલીમની જરૂર પણ હોય છે.
And there is need for investment, capacity building, and partnerships for strengthening and building this kind of new economic model that will look at all resource adequacy.
Thank you. Now we move on the second hot topic, because now we heard that we need a lot of capacity building, resources, but also we need some legislative framework. No? While we have plenty of legislation regarding climate targets and national determined contribution, and there is no comparable framework for resource use reduction targets, what are the reasons behind this, and how could we hopefully overcome them as soon as possible? We want to start.
Okay, there are no volunteers.
You are our
I'm
icebreaker.
always the first volunteer. So for me, there is a problem that we are inheriting, that is the fragmentation of the scientific and policy communities. So for many years, we had the climate change communities, the circular economy communities, the biodiversity communities, and they were working really in silos. I don't like a lot this expression, but okay, we understand what we mean. So for example, if you take the IPCC reports, historically in the summary for policymakers, practically there were no references to circularity or to biodiversity. Biodiversity, yes, but the biodiversity suffering the effects of climate change, not the opposite. And similarly, if you look at the European legislation, the first Circular Economy Action Plan, they mention vaguely climate change. Now this is changing, hopefully. So because of science is advancing with the seminal studies, the IPCC BESS report of 2021, the different studies on circularity, and now we are integrating this more and more. And I think this is one of the key objectives of the European Green Deal. But of course, changing this is really difficult. Even in the mindset, working in the Commission, I should not say this, but so in changing the mindset of people like me, like the administration, is very difficult if you were always in a certain framework. And then we have a problem also that the market forces do not always move in the same direction. So declaratively, yes, but when we go to concrete actions and we are proposing legislation, let's take the case of the recent deforestation regulation. So at the end, those who feel, okay, I agree with climate, we want to change the climate change, biodiversity, but don't touch my sector. So there is this problem. And then we have a global problem, that is the population. The global population is increasing. Also, more and more people are reaching the middle class every year, 140 million. This is super good, but of course the pressure on resources is increasing. So these people reaching the middle class want to live as we live ourselves. So eating more meat, traveling in plane, etc. So we have also a global problem that very often is, I would say, is demographic, but is very, very often neglected. And this leads to the importance of sufficiency.
And maybe the fact that all these challenges are so clear say us that it's time to overcome them. Huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, go.
Well, in short, and to be a little theoretical, I just don't think we have been brave enough, and that is the main reason why enough it hasn't happened yet. And of course, when you take a look at the frameworks and legislation side, we haven't made polluters pay. We have taken some very good steps in many levels of multi-level action, but still it's not going far enough or fast enough. And also, of course, we haven't made extinction pay. I'm not sure if this is a good idea, because I don't want extinction to take place and then someone having to pay. But you know, the idea is there. We haven't made environmental degradation be expensive enough. But maybe I would like to share some nice, good practices that we have in the city level, because we need some solutions, and I think we need large-scale solutions. We really need to change the system, but because of, at least I don't know if I have the time to wait for the system to change if it doesn't take place quite quickly. We need to also start to act on a local level and introduce different policies that will take us to the right direction. We have lots of renewable energy communities in energy sector. I think a lot has happened. For example, in Finland during the energy crisis last year, we were able to, households were able to decrease 10% of their electricity consumption just out of solidarity towards Ukrainian people. So I think that the possibilities are there. In my city, we have introduced a 1.5 lifestyle project where people can participate and local industries, companies can participate to introduce different ways to live a lifestyle that would take us to 1.5 path. And of course, circular economy that has been mentioned. Many cities are doing lots in circular economy strategies, roadmaps, and trying to really reduce the use of material.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to take over from my sister here, and what I wanted to share is that we are all seeing signs that the current economic model that we are right now living in, it's fractured. You know, there are over 54% of the workers across the world are in the informal economy, and especially in India, 93% of the workforce is in the informal economy. Out of the total number of women that are working in India, 82% are the informal workers, and these belong to sectors like home-based workers, street vendors, construction workers, and majority of these women are unregistered and they are outside the purview of the government schemes, social protection, and all other aspects. And it is and the climate shocks are impacting them disproportionately. And we are all seeing, and therefore this all shows that while we are making progress, as you were just saying that a lot of people are moving to middle class, but then while we are making progress, there is a large portion of workforce that is left behind. And what we at SEWA, organizing informal sector women workers, have seen that no country in the world can progress if half of its population is left behind. And you know, therefore there is a need for a new economic model. That there is a need for an economic model that does not concentrate the wealth into the hands of the few at the cost of many. And such economic models shall harness the power of taxations, legislations to ensure that no one is treated as, the workers are not treated as resources for growth, but are treated as humans who create growth. And therefore they must enjoy the fair share of the benefits. And we at SEWA call this creating an economy of nurturance. And I think when we bring in that kind of nurturing economy, it will lead to beyond sufficiency and growth.
Yeah, maybe if I can add on 2 points. I think that issue that mentioned lastly in terms of taxation and making polluters pay, I think that's a very critical one. Unfortunately, in this particular process here, and you don't have to see over the last 20 years, there has hardly been any progress. But I think it was France and Kenya, 2 countries which basically established in the context of this COP and some previous meetings a specific task force on innovative ways of taxation. And of course there are certain examples that come up over and over again, like taxing maritime transport or aviation. Aviation I find a particularly good example because it's still maybe the richest 5% or something which are the ones who fly through the world, right? So there are many people anyway outside of this. So if we would find ways, maybe the EU with some other countries, really taxing more those polluters and then use the money both for domestic purposes and maybe promoting such solutions, but also, of course, for international solidarity and support, whether it's the Loss and Damage Fund or the Adaptation Fund. I think that are really solutions which we also need to promote. And maybe last point, I think, one thing which I find so great, let's say, about the climate challenge is that so many things connect with it. You mentioned circular economy, we talk about renewables, we talk about ecosystems, and I have experienced also in the community I work, I live in Bonn in Germany, that this is something which connects many people and initiatives. This is also inspiring if you work with, whether it's the Parents for Future, whether it's local environmental protection groups. There's so much we can come together, and I feel this is really inspiring and motivating from the local to the national and also global policy level. So I think that's something we can also really see as an asset, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. We explored both practical things side of this aspect, but also the vision that we need to change. And now, of course, we go again on the overconsumption issues. we already said that in the global north we are overconsuming beyond planetary boundaries. So what could be a sustainable resource framework based on sufficiency and planetary boundaries? And especially, what is the role of the governance at different levels, United Nations, European Union, national governments, but also city council and the civil society organization. So in other words, what is the link between social justice and responsibilities?
I can start here and
Thank you.
So I feel that in order to achieve what you just said, there is a need for a very important need for partnerships between the workers' organizations and the multilateral organizations, partnerships with workers' organizations and the governments and the academia and the research institutes. Because currently what is happening is the countries of the global south and the informal workers are being treated as the dumping ground for the technology and the innovations and all everything that is not working or not sustainable in the global north is being pushed into the global south. However, and then the global south countries are again then blamed for being the highest polluters or highest emitters of carbon emission, and therefore there is a need for bringing in partnerships between the workers of the global south and the researchers, the academia, to understand what are the issues and challenges that these workers face and design innovations, adaptations and mitigation strategies which are specifically designed to address these issues and challenges. That will help in inclusion and it will help in growth and also climate action.
Thank you. Who want to build up on this?
Yeah, well, I think that policies need to come on each level, and each level in the governance system is possible. Each level has the possibilities to do so much, and if all act at the same time, it of course goes to the same direction, which is very important. But maybe I would also like to bring the discussion, the feminist approach to economy and feminist macroeconomics, and I really wish that more governments, more parties would introduce feminist approach to economics and get over the fact that it's a word that raises sometimes eyebrows or is seen a very party politics issue, but feminist policies have a lot to do with the degrowth idea, and the important thing is that we would put equality, well-being and environmental good, intergenerational justice above, even next to, but above economic growth, so that in changing the whole macroeconomic framework, we would be able to try for different things. I think this also goes to overconsumption, because overconsumption doesn't bring well-being to people. It gives degradation and inequality. So my answer and solution is feminist approach.
Thank you. Can Europe or no?
Yes, I can.
Yeah,
I can.
Yeah, the governance level.
Yes, you raise a super important point, because probably my previous intervention was a little bit misleading. So it's true that 140 million people are reaching the middle class, but at the same time we have more and more inequalities in the country. So I have here some data from Piketty, you know Thomas Piketty, the economist. So in Europe, the top 10% richest people own 37% of the national income. In Brazil or India, 55%, the top richest. So, and of course, this has also implications, and you mentioned the case of aviation that I think is very clear in terms of emissions. So we are not all equals in terms of our responsibility. There is, of course, the gap north-south, but even within countries, we have data that say that the bottom 50% of the world population emitted only 12% of the global emissions, and the top 10% emitted 48% of the total. These are data from a researcher, Lucas Chancel, in a paper published in Nature. And in this analysis, there is even something more important that for me was a little bit shocking. We always talk about the differences between countries, north, south, etc. But he analyzes the data and he says that in terms of emission, the differences are more within countries than between countries. So we have the inequality also in our own countries, so we have all our responsibility, let's say. Then, of course, here I'm representing the European Commission, so you know that the social, one of the principles of the Green Deal is the leaving no one behind, this social component. And for this, there is the Just Transition Fund, the Social Climate Fund, but probably this is not enough. So we have to go to policies and at governance much more aggressive, looking, for example, at taxation. And the example of aviation, I think, is terrible. So we need really, we are living a situation where last year there were 123 billion euros of fossil fuel subsidies in Europe, forced by the crisis in Ukraine, so probably it can be justified, but 123 billion euros. And at the same time, these energy companies are doing record benefits. The windfall benefits that Sandrine mentioned before. So we have really a problem at the governance level. So we say there is no money for this change, but we are expending a lot of money. There are some groups that are, some enterprises that are winning a lot of money in this situation of crisis. So this is my point.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'd like to open the floor for around 10 minutes discussion. I don't know if it's possible to see on screen if there are Slido questions or I read. Oh, maybe, yeah. And meantime, I also ask our dear panelists to think about a final word sentence for a takeaways of this panel discussion. So, first question from online participants. Is more dialogue on sufficiency solution needed among economists, and could this lead to greater public acceptability of sufficiency? We want to. Yeah.
Yes, I think there is greater dialogue needed. I think one of the challenges is I think we started off with this so much focus still on the GDP, despite the last 30 years of discussion. I remember when I started university, which is now a couple of years back, I learned about this already in university. So, but I think there's also new generations of economists coming, and I think we need to find ways that it's not just a research exercise, so to say, right? But even economists becoming more, let's say, proactive in really showcasing how important it is to change the metrics. It's only one element in the debate, but I think it's quite a critical one. But it's also important, I think, in the end, it's not decisive whether they label it sufficiency or use a different term, as long as you know the underlying concept is the same. And I think you brought it up, that with the term sufficiency, you need to explain it. It's not something which resonates with policymakers in most of the countries. That sometimes makes it more difficult to talk about what you actually want to achieve. So I think we also need to be clever in the messaging, depending on who we target.
Yeah, there is also a question, 2 questions from the room. Maybe we can start. Yeah. Sufficiency password. Yeah. Okay, you can put. Yeah, maybe a mic, because it's also recorded for the online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lloyd Russell-Moyle, Member of Parliament in the UK and former Vice President of the Forum for 4 years, and I covered your brief. The panel's been really good, but my problem is that in Europe and in America, the middle class have experienced degrowth. They've experienced degrowth for the last 15 years. No, they have on the, no, you're wrong. No, I'll tell you why you're wrong. It's because you're talking about a macroeconomic experience that they've had. Their personal experience,
please,
their personal,
let's finish the question.
Their personal experience is degrowth. Their personal budget has degrown, has shrunk, their personal life expectancy has shrunk, and you can, and that is a crisis of neoliberalism, yeah? Clearly. The problem is, if we say the solution to the crisis of neoliberalism is that you're going to have to degrow, immediately we are using terminology that creates backlashes. And if we live in democracies, and I think that's questionable, but if we live in democracies in Europe and America, what we see is a huge backlash. So we see in Germany, the AfD really on the rise, and complaining about the boiler ban, for example, and really gaining ground on that. We see in Britain the pushback on electric cars, and we see probably in Europe now that the far right and the right together will have a majority at the European Parliament elections. And part of that will be on an anti-green, anti-degrowth message. So how do we get our messaging correct? Because I think we all agree the content, but the messaging is very problematic, and particularly considering how Biden has been so successful in the IRA, where they have got trade unionists and the middle class on board by saying that we are going to have more manufacturing, more development, more growth in your area, and that has brought them on board. So how do we do that, bringing people on board whilst understanding degrowth is a toxic term for the majority of people in the West?
Thank you. So, in other words, how to frame the message of the Beyond Growth sufficiency. We take also the other questions so the panelists can answer.
Yes, my question was, to a certain degree you already answered. For example, there's a window of opportunity for policies on fossil fuel subsidies in the Netherlands. Plans are being developed at the moment. So I was wondering if panelists could outline maybe 3 to 5 policies which you think have the greatest window of opportunity to be implemented within the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
Okay. The question and then the answers.
So thank you for this conversation around sufficiency. I think it's very interesting, but I feel like it's still not addressing one piece which feels to me like the elephant in the room, which is the roots of growth, which has to do with the debt-based monetary system. The Club of Rome had, I believe, published a book called Money and Sustainability, The Missing Link. And if we have a monetary system that issues money based on debt, that then brings pressure from interest, and that then brings a push to grow. And we need to, I think, decouple debt and interest from livelihood and jobs and well-being. And in order to do that, it seems to me that we need to bring together this agenda, let's say, around redesigning the systems, maybe the Bridgetown Initiative, etc., as well as bring this currency issue. So I think no one has really looked at, I mean, we are talking on the financial level, we're not talking on the monetary level. When you're talking about issuance of currency, and all currencies in the world, and this is not a capitalist versus, I mean, all currencies, like I would say, even Russia, Iran, etc., everybody belongs to a growth economy. So how do you actually bring these agendas together? Thanks.
Thank you. So now our panelists, maybe starting answer from how to frame the message.
Yeah, I mean, it's alluding a bit to what I said earlier. I think it's also important for elections, as you said. There are different audiences, and people speak and listen to different ways of talking. And I mean, we as NGOs, we often spend a lot of time on developing narratives, which sometimes is a bit a painful exercise because we're always repackaging what we're talking about. But it's also an important exercise. And I think in all those different parts of society, even I think there are things which resonate when we talk about, you know, less destruction of ecosystems. That's something which resonates with many people, right? And I think there are more examples, I cannot go through all of them, where we really think, okay, how do we package the messaging towards the different audiences that they basically lead to the same results, and also not gets too much stuck whether we talk about sufficiency or degrowth. I mean, to some extent it's necessary in the academic sphere and conceptual sphere, but I think for getting out the messaging, and we can work with policy examples, and I think fairness was mentioned. One issue with fossil fuel subsidies often is, I think, that they are so broad that even, let's say, rich parts of society benefit from them, and benefit from them in a, let's say, relatively high manner. And, you know, going into these, for example, figuring out how can we adjust them in a way that they are even fairer, and that then it's also easier to phase them out, for example.
Other insight on this? Yeah,
yes, I would like to reply to this question on degrowth and in two manners. The first one is, are we really talking about degrowth, what is happening in Western countries in the last years, or is that the middle class is becoming poorer? Because the concepts are different. So what we are seeing is that the rich people are becoming much richer. while the middle class is losing its quality of living, if you wish. So it's a problem, again, of inequality. This is my view, at least. I see you don't agree, but okay, we can discuss later. And then I think it's important to talk in practice, what degrowth or beyond growth means. So, if you decide, I'm not going to use my car, I'm going to use my bike. And this is a complete disaster for the GDP. So, I use my bike, it doesn't cost a lot of money, you don't use oil, you don't have to pay, it's very healthy, you don't pollute, while when you are using the car, you are polluting, so you need hospitals, you need doctors, people are sick, you need big infrastructures, while bike you can go through a park. So biking is really a disaster for growth. So perhaps it looks a little bit, yes, funny, but this is the concept of, in my view, of degrowth or beyond growth. So we are not going to reduce our quality of living. Indeed, we can increase it. Less pollution, healthier lifestyles. We are seeing plenty of changes, and thank you for mentioning this, at local level. So a few years ago, I'm from Spain. Nobody used a bike in cities. There was not any biking pathway. Even in Brussels. When I arrived to Brussels, it was crazy to bike. So these are the sort of examples. So you can do investments in ways of living that I think are better, but I'm sorry for the GDP. Also, when we are talking about energy efficiency, we isolate our buildings. It's better for the GDP, it's better to continue consuming energy. So you see, I think we have to clarify what we mean with this concept. Sorry for being so long, but we can discuss later.
Yeah, maybe we can move on the policy. Yeah, Nina?
Yes, I think also that in the root of everything is eradicating inequality, because that is something we need to do in all levels. And it's not just a national question, but also a local question. How do we address inequality? And I come from this to the messaging parts. I see what you mean, and I think we have, all in politics have encountered the same phenomenon. Then again, who is better in doing wording than politics themselves? We are quite capable of coming up with different wordings, so maybe it's us to make the solution in some way. And about opportunities in policies, I think that the taxation is, of course, quite important and the key to really touch upon overconsumption, and also to gain something to eradicate inequality, because we need, of course, solutions and resources to touch this really pressing problem. And what I'm hopeful is that at some point during my lifetime, we would be able to put down the boundaries between visible wage labor and unpaid work. We talk about this issue so often, so much, and I think that is also something that would change our mindset and the way we calculate things, if we would really start to see visible or unpaid work as valued as other forms of labor. And this is something I think we can achieve in the near future. And also, you know, what is even worse for economy than biking, it's walking, I think, I suppose. That's the worst thing you can do. But it was also something I thought, because while planning local policies, mobility is often the thing that we have the most difficulties in, and the people will get most angry if you change very radically things. But then again, it's also a thing of wording and messaging and communications, in my opinion, because people don't want to live in cities that are very polluted and very carful. I wouldn't love to live in Dubai, to be honest. People like to live in cities that have green spaces, good air quality to breathe, and attractive in that way. So really, I know it's not a systemic change to introduce bike lanes and walking areas, but in a way it is actually, because if we do it in so many cities everywhere, it doesn't only bring equality to people, because all people are able to move in a better way, but it also reduces our consumption. So I really, really do think that it is also often the small policies in all around the world that also make a big difference.
Thank you. Maybe on the monetary question?
Yes, so Before I go to the monetary question, I also wanted to add just one thing to the policies, and that is also connected to the monetary question. So what I also feel is that there is a need for policies that promote local decentralized economies. Local decentralized economies would emphasize on the role of women. So to your point on feminism, it would emphasize the role of women in the economy. It would stress upon the relationship between the work and the worker instead of the monetary terms of work, and it would roping in digital technology at the grassroots in such local decentralized economies would also remove the drudgery from the traditional and mundane tasks and make them technology tech savvy, and it will also generate new employment opportunities for the rural youth, thereby cutting down on rural outmigration and therefore urbanization and the issues related to that. And when several such local decentralized economies, when they overlap, it will lead to strengthening of the national and the global economies. And I would say that there was a world before the airplanes and the high-rise buildings. So we must work on policies that promote localization and decentralization.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have not time to answer all the questions, but I thank you for the question on slide and also for the participatory vibe from the room. But for the sake of ecological timing approach, we move towards conclusion. Have you think about the final word, final sentence as take away with the discussion, maybe, Sven?
My final sentence, I would like to connect to this process here in the way that I think with the next round of NDCs, we also will have an opportunity to go back to connect the national with international level and seek for those NDCs to find better ways of including, let's say, sufficiency concept-wise measures, successes. And there's a decision-making in the GST discussions where at least until a few days ago we had quite some useful language in that regard with us. So I also encourage you to push on this level for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say the final word here is, I'm from our side, the informal sector workers, is that there is a need for involving more grassroots women and informal workers into the decision making and the discussions at policy level in context of the climate change and sufficiency.
Yes, to finalize, I would like sorry, I'm taking your copyright.
No.
So I think that it's unlikely that we are going to change radically and from one day to the other this historical paradigms. So the GDP, the concept of growing policies, etc. As you say, there is also the political wind is changing in Europe. But you gave a very good point that you said, at least I copied that, we have no time to wait to the system to change. So at our level, at our local level and personal level, we can do plenty of things. For example, biking. And we can do our own revolution against the GDP in our day-to-day work.
Okay, I also want to start with NDCs. I think it's a possibility, and I think that, and I hope that in the next round of NDCs we can also include local level action to NDCs, because local level brings tremendously good policies and good results into this game. So remember local level. And I think that also, I hope that throughout the world we are able to introduce feminist politics, feminist economics into politics of all levels and make it a real discussion. And when someone says to us it's not a real concept, we say to them that it's a real concept, go to Google if you don't know about it, because it's a really, really serious issue. And finally, everyone has to run for local politics because it's a place to change the world also.
Yeah, I would like to give also my final takeaway of this panel discussion. I think that we should act as lovers. When we love someone, something, we can wait and we start acting. And also in our fight against climate crisis, we have to act in this way towards a new relation with the economic society, among humans, life beings, and the planet that is more non-violent than it actually is it. And now for a very true conclusion, and with a big round of applause for our panelists. It's my pleasure to invite to the podium Sophia Wiegand, Vice President of the Generation Climate Europe.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Daniele, for the introduction, the moderation. Thank you to all the panelists for your really great contribution. Thank you to the keynote speakers. It's going to be quite a challenge to sum up all these very good points. But yeah, we've heard it, and we've known since at least 1972, as Sandrine Dixon has said. The planet is on fire, we're pushing planetary boundaries, and there is no life on a dead planet. And yet, it is still considered quite radical to say growth is not the solution, at least not endless growth. We need more sufficiency. We need to challenge the paradigms that underpin this capitalist, destructive, extractive economy. And we are counting on the Commission, which has already worked on sufficiency, to help us challenge this discourse and make it less radical to say these things, but actually make sufficiency a paradigm that is going to be the norm in the future. We've heard a lot about the challenges, but we've also heard a lot about potential solutions. We need to change the financial system and the taxation. We need to shift the fiscal burden away from labor and to those industries and individuals that are using heavy industry, extracting heavily. And those industries that are overly represented at this COP, with more than 2,000 delegates trying to undermine the progress of these negotiations. 30 to 55% of people, depending on 30 to 55% of income, depending on where you live, are with the richest few percent, and those people are the ones that are emitting the most. The inequality is heavy, and we need to create more resource justice in the world. The EU can contribute a lot to this, and the EU resource justice framework would be a really great start. We also need to democratize resource distribution and economic decision-making more. That means including those that are most vulnerable to the practices that are now destroying our planet. We need to have more women in decision-making. We need to take a feminist approach. We need to have more youth engagement and youth inclusion. We need to have local communities have their say. We need indigenous communities to have their say. And we need to strengthen workers' rights and have workers at the core of this transition. Workers need to be allowed to unionize. Workers need to have partnerships with their international counterparts. And then together we can manage this transition. We also need, Reema has said this, focus on education and equal employment opportunities, not just for women, also for young people. This is a very important point also for us as Generation Climate Europe, because young people need to be part of this just transition. We need to dismantle the fossil fuel industry. We've heard there are billions in money made by fossil fuel industries every single day. This money should go to renewable energies. We need to triple renewables. This is one of the few industries that should still continue to grow, while fossil fuel industries should be phased out once and for all. We need to change the paradigms in the NDCs, put sufficiency principles in there at the core, change the measures of how we define progress. GDP is not the measure to define whether a society is progressing. Define other measures: happiness, health, physical, mental, planetary. We've heard a lot of really, really good solutions and insights, but it's up to us now to actually implement them. Sufficiency is not a niche topic. Sufficiency is a topic that we all care about. Oliver Röpke has said, we are not few, we are many, and we're growing by the day. And we need to make sure that this topic is becoming a mainstream paradigm. Thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you to the European Youth Forum. Thank you to the European Economic and Social Committee. And thank you to all of you for being here, for caring about this topic, for being multipliers and spreading the message. We need a different kind of economy. Thanks also to the online participants for sending your questions. And now let's have a productive COP, fight back on the lack of progress that we've seen so far. And we hope to see you very, very soon again in one of our events.
On behalf of the European Youth Forum, I duplicate all the thanks, and thanks also to Generation Climate Europe. But also I would like to thank you all the participants, both in presence and online, because the discussion are valuable when we do them together. And now is the time to leave this room, but let's make sufficiency desiderable together. Thank you.
I haven't seen anyone doing it.
Sorry? No.